All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're going to just let the chat and the folks flow through for a little bit, and then we will get started. Feel free to say hey, say where you're from, say how you're feeling, any of those things. And I'm going to just put up the slide, and then we'll introduce you to each other. Then we will get started. So, welcome to Monday in May 23rd. All right, we've got enough people in here, and I know I want to maximize all of the time for our conversation. When folks join us, they'll be able to figure out that we're just talking about joy. Hi, everyone. You're here for finding joy and community with each other. And I'm so pleased to be here with my friends. And so what we're going to do to start off today's conversation is to introduce ourselves. And so I will start, and then I'll kick it over to Cynthia. Actually, that's not the right thing. I'm going to start with Cynthia, and then she'll kick it over to Jeena. Go ahead.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. So great to be here in this virtual space with everyone. My name is Cynthia Pong. I'm the founder and CEO of Embrace Change, which is a coaching and consulting firm. We specialize in working with and supporting people of color in the workplace. And I've been doing that for about 6+ years. Former lawyer, former public defender. Jeena?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Jeena Cho. I'm the co-author of The Anxious Lawyer, an 8-week guide to a more joyful and satisfying law practice through mindfulness and meditation. I am a coach and a consultant. And let's see, I've been doing consulting work for, like 6 or 7 years. And I was a practicing lawyer for over 15 doing consumer bankruptcy law. And I was also an assistant state attorney.
Neha.
Hello. Hey, everyone. I'm Neha Sampat. I'm CEO of Belong Lab, where we help organizations create cultures of belonging into which each of us can bring more of their true and best self. It's a lot, because it actually is a lot. I've been doing this work for, it'll be 7 years this summer. I also am a lawyer by training and practice. And I say that with a bunch of question marks because it feels like 20 lifetimes ago, but I worked in higher ed after practicing law, and then came to building out the business. In the business, we work on a lot of barriers to belonging, including what has really become our showcase piece, which is our Owning Your Value suite of programs.
Fantastic. And I am Paula Edgar. I am from Brooklyn, New York. That is super important to who I am. And I'm so happy to be here today. What do? I am CEO of PGE Consulting Group, and I deliver professional development through the lens of DE&I. Sometimes you grab me for that. Other times you grab me for things like branding, business development, and how to navigate the landscape, and particularly the law. I am a lawyer, although I don't practice law anymore. Most of my clients are law firms and legal departments. And so I benefit in that way from affinity bias. So I'll take the benefit of that. What else? In addition to doing the things that I just talked about, I like to add value through civic engagement. And so I'm on the board of the New York City Bar Association, the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, and several other boards, 7 in fact, in which I hopefully add additional value to the world and make sure people come together using an inclusive lens to make the world a better place. So with that, we are here because one day Jeena and I were talking, and I was like, we should do this. And I'm so happy that we did. And so before we get into the conversation at hand, Jeena's going to do her thing and heal us through mindfulness. So I will go ahead and share your slide, Jeena. There you go.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I just want to name that I'm feeling really a lot of activation in my nervous system. And when that happens, it's an invitation to do some of the practices that I teach. And I also practice to send signals to your nervous system that says, hey, you know what, there's a lot that's happening right now, but in this particular moment, you're safe. So I'm going to invite everyone to just engage with me for like 2 minutes, and we are going to do a very brief somatic practice. So I want you to, wherever you may be, really bring your attention to your feet. So really feeling the soles of your feet against the ground below you. And if you're sitting, really feeling the sensations of your body resting against a chair, that feeling of being supported. Then bringing the attention up through the spine, feeling the front body, so feeling the chest, the belly. And then bringing the attention to the back body. And as you breathe, actually imagine that you're expanding your back body through your breath. And then taking a deep breath in, and let's bring the breath and expand the side body. And coming up through the shoulders, you might roll your shoulders back and actually expanding your chest area. Coming up through the neck and the head. And if your eyes are closed, I invite you to open your eyes and look around the space that you're in, the physical space that you're in. So looking at the ceiling, the 4 walls, if there are 4 walls, making sure you actually turn your whole body and look behind you. So we're gently inviting the nervous system to recognize that in this moment you are safe. And look at the doors and the windows around you. There are exits. You are safe in this moment. And if it feels comfortable for you, let's bring a hand to your heart center and a heart to your belly button. And as community, let's take 3 deep breaths together, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And one more, breathing in and breathing out. And I will turn it back over to Paula.
Thank you so much for that. It seems like so just, oh, we should just breathe. But when I breathe, sometimes I'm like, you know what? That's what your body's supposed to do. Who knew? you feel centered, and I feel centered, and I'm so happy we decided to do that. I hope all of you feel like you gave yourself a little bit of love just now, because that's what it is when you make all the things work the way they're supposed to. Slow down and remember that that's what we're supposed to do. So joy in community with each other. I want to, before we jump into our conversation, just reflect a little bit on some joy quotes and a couple of things that are maybe not what we would consider joy, or not what we're feeling right now, but I want to center us into where I would like to go. And so I love this. I discovered that joy is not the negation of pain, but rather acknowledging the presence of pain and feeling happiness in spite of it. That's one that resonated. Another, if you carry joy in your heart, you can heal any moment. And I love this is from Carlos Santana, because I feel joy when it comes to music. And I think that connection is a helpful one in remembering that we have tools that can help us to access our joy. So let's hold on to that. Final one here is find a place inside where there's joy, and the joy will burn out the pain. I love that, right? Like that we have this built, like this inner core of joy that we can just tap into that will eradicate the other stuff, at least in the moment. It might be superhero speak, but I do like that thought in terms of thinking that we have that energy that we can tap into. And I hope that we can find the truth for ourselves in that as well. And I'm sorry to jump right into the not joyful places, but I do think we need to remember that connecting with each other in community means that we have to acknowledge that our community, wherever you consider community, is suffering right now. I shared just recently in my newsletter that I'm still sitting with Buffalo. I'm still sitting with the Ukraine. I'm still sitting with everything you see on the screen, but there's so many other things. And I know that all of us are also navigating whatever our personal, individual, and then our institutional and organizational, whatever spaces that we have these challenges are, they're there. And whether that's the workplace, home, or the combination of those things, and society, we have to remember that despite all of this, and I don't say that with lightness, despite all this, there's some fun things, there's some good things, and I'm pulling some of mine, and I hope you share them. There's some things that made me smile, and I just need to tap into that. And I invite you, as we start our conversation, to join us in telling us some things that brought you joy. Whether that is, I woke up this morning and did not have to tell my kids to brush your teeth, whatever it is, can you just use the chat right now to say what has brought you joy? And we will commence our conversation now with hopefully some good things from you all to buoy us in this. What has brought you joy? And so let's take a second for that. I'll just say for me this morning, I literally said, I can't wait for today. I can't wait for this conversation. This is bringing me joy. And so I'm excited. Yes, I have some Bridgerton shout outs. Yes, Kamala Harris. So good alignment. Yes. Family, friends, children, health, the weather. Yes, although I have to say, I walked outside this morning and it was like, oh, are the allergies just trying to take me out? Is that what's going to happen right now? Live theater. Yes. Oh, Barry, congratulations. Yay. Yay, the return. Oh, good. Molly, I'm glad that you, it's not just me then. Okay. With that, I want to start with this. I want to ask each of you, what does joy mean to you? And Neha, I want to start with you. What does joy mean to you?
That was a really hard question for me to answer for a really long time. And the truth of the reason why is that I never bothered to think about it. I got so caught up in living my life and doing that joy became something that I forgot about. I remember thinking of it as those fleeting moments of awe, I remember at some point I kind of woke up and I was like, gosh, I haven't felt joy in a long time. And I was thinking about what it meant. I'm like, it's those fleeting moments of awe. It's that standing on the top of a mountain, looking out over the earth, right? And feeling this sense of awe, this aliveness. And I thought, gosh, I haven't felt that in a long time. I mean, I'm the mother of a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. It's just been doing, running a business. And I realized that it's not okay for joy to be fleeting. So I had to then rethink joy. I had to first understand why I hadn't thought about joy in a long time. And I actually think there are a number of reasons. For me, capitalism is a huge part of it, right? We are accultured to strive, run, no time for feelings, no time for joy, no time for lamenting either, right? It's not even like we're not allowed to have joy. We're not allowed to have joy, we're not allowed to have pain, we're not allowed to have sorrow, just go, do. So I think part of it is capitalism as a a daughter of Asian immigrants to this country. So, you know, shout out for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I want to share a little bit of how I also think it was for me cultural, like my culture of origin, and also kind of the immigrant mentality of seeing like joy as almost an indulgence in a way. And I had to really unlearn that. And so when I started to unlearn that, I started to look for joy in the tiny things. And this is where, Jeena, you actually helped me a lot, because you really inspired me to learn mindfulness and to practice it. And I started to be mindful about things like having my morning cup of coffee and extracting from that cup of coffee a tiny slice of joy. As I can't remember the name of the person who came up with that terminology, but I'm going to pop an essay I wrote about finding those small moments of joy in the chat once I'm done talking. And I cite the person in there who used that tiny slice of joy. So that actually was life shifting for me, right? Like finding those tiny slices of joy. And this was pre-pandemic, pre-resurgence of the racial justice movement. Then of course, right, the last 2.5 years happened. And then I was like, I can't even find those tiny slices, like everything is horrible. And I realized that I had also been seeing joy and suffering as mutually exclusive. So part of my kind of next level learning has been to understand that these experiences can exist together. And Paula, those slides, I mean, they evoked such pain, and honestly, I feel emotional. But like, we need to feel that. We need to be able to not create this false sense of joy to try to just grit through what we're living through. We have to like find joy and togetherness. And so what I've tried to find is moments of joy through connection, moments of joy through commiseration, quite frankly. I mean, with each of you in some way, we have lamented what we're living through. And through that co-lamentation, did I just create a new word? You know, that mirroring, that recognition of, oh, in you, I see my struggle. I have been able to find a deep joy. And before I pass the mic, I just want to share a little story that really, I think, brings this home. I want to say a couple weeks ago, but it feels like a couple of lifetimes of trauma ago. It was the week of the draft decision overturning Roe. And I, you know, as many of us, had a very rough week. It was a week full of me questioning my impact, like, what the F am I even doing? Does it even matter? Blah, 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 you know, on top of years of struggle. And so I posted a tweet, you know, saying, you know, sometimes even I question my impact. And something magical happened. A number of people tweeted back at me or reached out to me through direct messaging. People called me up to remind me of my impact. People connected with me to be like, I also feel that way. People who I respect and admire, like, I was like, holy crap, you're like so impactful and you feel this way. So that normalization really helped me. And that Friday night, I got a direct message from someone I met through Twitter. And her name is Sarah. And she sent me a video message. She said, Neha, I'm at this conference and I have a quiet moment, and I stumbled upon a piano here in this room. And, you know, I've been thinking about you. She also had messaged that she had been having a rough time too. And she said, I've been thinking about you. And there's this like piece of sheet music sitting here on this piano. And I'm gonna sight read it, and I'm gonna play it for you. And then she said, actually, I'm gonna play this for us. You'll recognize the song. And she started sight reading it and playing it. And I mean, I'm emotional even relaying this to you. The song was Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. And I'm sitting there listening to this friend who I've literally had 2 real life conversations with, who freaking like Lloyd Doblered the fuck out of friendship, right? That was her like holding a stereo above her head, a boombox above her head, being like, you know what? I hope this doesn't freak you out, because I know we've just talked 2 times, but I care about you, I feel you, and this one's for us. And damn, what a wonderful world.
Whew. The power of humanity. Thank you for sharing, Neha. Thank you. Cynthia, tell me, please,
Yes.
about what does joy mean to you?
This was also a hard question for me because I think similar to Neha, I've been very conditioned growing up in an immigrant Asian American household to think of joy as a carrot or a reward that we just grind and hustle for capitalism for. And it's something we get if after, a long, fabulous, accolades full career, you like earn it or you show you deserve it or something. So it's a lot of undoing that I'm constantly doing. But when I was thinking about this, we are talking about joy in community, and also it made me think about joy as like deepening your own relationship with yourself, because I also am very much an introvert, and so I'm very discerning, shall we say, about who I choose to spend time with, and I'm like pretty, I don't know, conscientious, maybe we can say, about like how I spend my energy and like what I put my energy towards, because to me it is a precious and limited, resource or whatnot. So I think about it as like sometimes to me joy is something that is had in community like this, and also sometimes it's one-on-one, and I feel like that is just as valuable kind of community feeling and support for me and for others, who are maybe more introverted leaning. So I think about that a lot, and this idea that we have to be able to discern and define for ourselves what it means. So hopefully everybody here today is like thinking about this for themselves too, and maybe you want to think about it later and reflect on it more, because the most important relationship we have in our lives is the relationship with ourselves. And that's not to be like super Western Eurocentric individualism like way, but simply because we have to make sure that our connection to ourselves and our core and our values and our intuition and our generational wisdom and all that stuff is intact, because the modern world is like ripping it apart, I feel like, every single day. So that's sort of the overarching thoughts I had about, joy, is that we have to think about it and decide for ourselves what that means. And sometimes it may be in community, sometimes community looks different. So once you kind of figure that out, I think it is exactly like Neha said, like how do you weave that into your everyday, your morning, noon, and night, your 24/7, as opposed to keeping it as a carrot that you like reserve for your vacation time or retirement. I mean, let it not be that. So that's first of all. And then I also think about like being able to say yes and no to things, because I work predominantly with women of color, and then beyond that, people of color, and then beyond that, institutions that are genuinely invested in the success of their employees of color. And so we have to be able to say yes and no to things. And I think for a lot of us as people of color, we are socialized and conditioned to say yes and to just like, say yes to things and go with it and figure it out later. And it's really hard for us sometimes to say no, because we might have people pleasing tendencies, or we've literally been punished or will be punished if we do say no, and take time for ourselves or take space for ourselves. And I mean, given the last 2+ years, but really decades, there's just been too little space for us to do that. We're like losing ourselves in work, I feel. So anyways, joy is also being able to know what to say yes and what to say no to at any given time, which also let's give ourselves permission to evolve and change that. What works for me now may not work for me in a month, in a year, in 2 years, and same for everybody else. So I think about that a lot. And thanks to other Cynthia in the chat for affirming that joy is not reserved for retirement thing. And then, I think we have to continually be aware, and Jeena's work is really foundational to that, making sure that we're aware at any moment of what is happening, that we're activated, that we are feeling X, Y, Z way, and then be able to build more joy into our lives, whether that means big community, small community, one-on-one community, community with yourself, maybe that's a thing. And then say yes and no to the appropriate things, because decision fatigue is real. So I'll stop there, and I want to see what everyone's been saying in the chat, but thank you for this question.
All facts. Jeena, I waited for you last because I know you showed up today. And so I wanted to give you a moment to hopefully get some joy from what our co-panelists were saying, and energize you. I hope that that's occurred. Talk to me about joy.
Yeah, well, I guess to be just like fully transparent, I got on this webinar today and I said to Paula, I am subject to breaking down in tears at any moment. So like just FYI, Let's see, joy. I think I just totally resonate with everything that Neha and Cynthia has shared. I am an immigrant. I came over from Korea when I was 10, and just, culturally, I mean, my parents were so on the edge of catastrophe. Like I grew up feeling very, very close to that line of complete catastrophe where we could be homeless. So like joy was so far removed from, our day-to-day existence, and just the fear around our livelihood. And I think also culturally, it's like, what, joy? That's so like, that's like, it's just seen as so frivolous. So I really started to reclaim my sense of joy during the pandemic when George Floyd murder happened, and there was, I guess, a collective awakening. I ended up taking a class on anti-racism at Spirit Rock, which is where I've done most of my mindfulness training. So I was looking at anti-racism through the lens of Buddhism. And what I wasn't expecting was that a huge part of our course would involve going back to the earliest memories of racism that we experienced. And, so it brought me back to being 10, and right, just like all the trauma that I experienced. And then also it got me to really think about intergenerational trauma. My parents were both born during the Korean War, and my mother was actually born in the midst of a war. Like, my grandmother was fleeing, there were refugees. They stopped in an abandoned building, and my grandmother gave birth to my mother in an abandoned building with bombs falling all around them and buildings collapsing. And I was having a conversation with a therapist, and she was like, what impact do you think that has on you? And I was like, what impact? I don't know. Why would that have any impact? That was my mom. And she was like, like, how would that not have an impact on you? So it got me to really think about intergenerational trauma, and also, right, I mean, if you just think about it, when my mother was born, right, women are born, girls are born with all the eggs that they're ever going to have within their bodies. So like literally I was in some way in existence, and I too have experienced that trauma. And just what we know about epigenetics and how trauma is passed down through a generation. And so much of what we're dealing with right now is trauma that is just far, far beyond any of our individual experiences. These are generational traumas that have been passed down, right, through the generations. So the healing also needs to happen as a community. Like when we think about huge topics like racism, sexism, patriarchy, white supremacy, so on and so forth, like these are not things that we can individually fix, right? So really thinking about, what does it mean as a community to show up with joy? And what does it mean as a community to engage in that collective healing, right? So we can actually look at our history and look at all the horribleness that has transpired, but also look at all the good, and to say, okay, how do we now as community engage in reconciliation? How do we as community engage in healing? And I've been really thinking about joy as an act of resistance, right? Because the impact of all of these structural structures is that it deprives you of joy, and I am not going to allow others to deprive me of my joy, because joy is the force that I want to use to show up in the world, right? I can show up in the world with many, many different attitudes. I can show up with hostility, with anger, with rage, which, right, I think all of us feel at some point, but that's not how I'm going to engage in collective healing, right? If I'm showing up with that energy. So for me, joy is, right, having my daughter wake up in the morning and declare first thing, Mommy, you're my best friend, or Mommy, I love you. And she kisses me and hugs me. Or the other day I was crying, and my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, looks at me and she says, Mommy, you have to calm your body. And I was like, what? I just like literally like living with my own personal Buddha. So yeah, so I'll just pause there.
I'm so filled up by each of you. I cannot thank you enough. And I want to start my response on what joy means to me by saying that it is gratitude. That I am able to tap into joy by being grateful. Sometimes it's just like, I'm grateful for just being here and taking a breath. And sometimes it is, I am so grateful for the opportunity to impact others or to be with others, whatever it is. And so gratitude is my first sort of prong. My second prong is authenticity. I'm Paula all the way around to the detriment sometimes, and definitely to the benefit most times of the people who I interact with. I can only bring me into the space, and I feel joy when I'm able to be on my scale of authenticity. If I'm anywhere over a 6, I am in my happy space. And I do believe that authenticity is not always 10. I'm never not me, but sometimes I can't be I can't be 10, I have to be 1, depending on where I am. And if I'm at a 6, joy is there, right? And the last piece of my sort of triad of authenticity and joy in there is presence. And so Jeena bringing us to that present space when we started really reminds you that at its minimum, how can we be anything if we don't tap into our humanity and the breath of, like, literal breath that drives us to enable us to feel pain and to feel joy. So when I think about the world and the life that we are living, and the oftentimes pain that we are navigating, especially in the last 2 years, I am, as someone mentioned in the chat, an extrovert. And so on its face, literally not being able to be in spaces with people, super painful for me. I would just be like leaning into the Zoom, like, hello, hi, can I, like, is it tangible? Maybe if I just think hard enough, I might be able to grab you. And the pain of not being able to physically be in contact with people hurt. But on the flip side, the joy of being able to connect with people who it would have taken me a lot more to see their faces, right? To be in their spaces, helped in that. And so what I want to bring us all to, as we sort of define joy in this space, is this. Each of us works with individuals, organizations, leaders, et cetera. And a part of me, and I think the conversation that Jeena and I had that drove this, needing to have this conversation, is that we have to remember that people are not robots, right? And the people who are working in our spaces, who are colleagues and who, report to us, whatever the dynamic is, they're people. And with that peopleness comes pain and comes joy. And the more that we can lessen the impact of the institutions and the individual, whether that's microaggressions or pain, racism, whatever, for those individuals, then we allow them to access joy better. And that joy means that they'll be able to understand that they can tap into the authenticity, that maybe they can be themselves in their spaces. And that's what inclusion is. And that's the work that we all do. And in its core is to say, let your people find joy in their spaces. So taking it away from the what we do to the who we are, because that's what we're here for. I just needed to say that. Joy has been not a hard place for me. I have to think, when Jeena says that joy is an act of resistance, I tap into joy as being my act of persistence. And I know that it is the state and the space in which African Americans and Black people have been essentially since they've come to this country, and before this, right? Before that. You think about when you hear about enslaved people and their experiences, and that they were able to take the scraps of food that were given to them that were not supposed to be anything that they would enjoy, and turn it into deliciousness, right? And you think about the broken instruments that they were given, and they turned those into joy and jazz and what we have today. And the the way in which remembering tradition was their mainstay and tapping into religion in not just the sense in which it was given to them, right? but what they had in whatever country in Africa they came from, that experience of culture and knowing that there's more beyond us and that ancestors will drive us. That is persistence. That is remembering that if I'm experiencing this pain right now, something else I can tap onto. And from when I was very little, I used to always kind of think about the experience of enslaved people. There's always been a place that I've had living in me, that how can this be that we have had evil such as this? How can this be that we, right? How people are not supposed to be like this? And yet we get continued reminders that evil will rear its ugly head when people are scared, when people are ignorant, when all of the things that we see now will make that happen. And so the joy is remembering things like Juneteenth, right? When you think, it's been a full 2 years since we have been free. And instead of being like, what the hell, right? Which I still am like that right now for them. It is, let us celebrate and let us continue to celebrate that is when we are able to tap into our freedom. Even though it sucks, even though we're not where we want to be. And I always imagine thinking back to those ancestors, like who would they think is going to be the sort of result of the joy that they were able to find and the experience that they had right now. And there's this quote and this t-shirt that people wear sometimes that says, I am the, somebody help me out here. It's like, I am the culmination of my ancestors' dreams. And are we not that? It doesn't, no matter who you come from, right? Then we are that. And that brings me joy too. No one probably could have ever imagined where we, wherever your we is, could be right now. Thank you, James. Thank you. I knew somebody would have it for me. Right, wildest dreams, wildest. And so that's what joy means to me. It's remembering that it is not just what I want it to be. It is in me to tap into. And that doesn't mean that I have to be toxically happy all the time, but it just means that joy is knowing that I can navigate and that there's something else beyond. As I was saying, the binoculars, like I know that something better is coming if I'm having a bad time today. That's joy, it's persistence in it. So I now want to open us up to talking about not just the what we feel about it, but how we access it. What are the tools that you all individually use to access joy? And so I said a couple things, but I want to hear from you all, and I open it up to any of you to speak. Go ahead, Neha, I see you.
Yeah, I just am in response to what you just shared, Paula, like tapping into, right, that joy that is there. It just made me think about the harsh truth that sometimes, especially, even just last week, it has been hard for me to find that. I will just be very honest. But what has buoyed me in those moments has been finding it in you all, right? And other people. So even just seeing the work you do, and this is where social media actually is a boon, because I actually can see what you're doing. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. Cynthia's doing this program she's been working on for the past, I don't even know how long. And, I got an update in my email, and it matters, right? And so there are those deep, dark moments for me where I have to kind of grab on to one of you and see the impact of your work to buoy myself. So that's one thing that has really helped me, is literally just following the amazing work that you all do.
I mean, I love that you shared that, because so often, when we decided to do this and I put this out that we were, going to do this, someone reached out and was like, aren't they like the folks who do the same thing you do? And I was like, are they? I thought they were coming at the competitor angle, but they were not. They were like, oh, this is super exciting because they were not familiar with us. But I immediately was like, don't you, like I was ready to do that. And instead, it just was a reminder that another piece of joy in this collaboration, seeing all the fancy things that y'all all do, is that there's so much space for all of us to be great, right? And to access our individual spaces and to flourish is wonderful.
And we need it because we are each do hit our moment, our dark moments, right? And gosh, if I didn't have that belief in your work and you, it would be very difficult to navigate those.
Mhm. Cynthia, were you going to say something? I saw you waving.
I'm just getting all amped up. But yeah, I think that it's just continually we have to recognize, and this comes with doing a lot of your own self-work, your therapy, your healing, your mindfulness, whatever works for you, to be able to see when scarcity mindset or this comparison game, these type of kind of negative thought patterns that creep in at any given moment because of how we're socialized and conditioned to be kind of pit against each other. And I would have had the same reaction, Paula. Like, I also would have been like, what do you mean? We're not competitors or whatnot. And like, truly, we all do very distinct work in a larger, similar space, but there's no limitation to this space. And I think us thinking that it is a fixed pie or a zero-sum game is very damaging. And just, like I think about a lot with myself and also clients and colleagues and people in the Leadership Accelerator that Neha was referencing. Like, it's one thing if somebody comes in basically, and this is a bit of a violent metaphor, so please go with me for a second, if they like try to stab you in the back, that's on them. But if we continue to take that and like keep pushing the knife into ourselves, like at a certain point that's on us and we can choose a different way. So I think about that a lot because we have to be able to disentangle for ourselves what's going on. To your point, Paula, that you said earlier, maybe this was even before we got on the call, but it was like, and what now? What was it that you said your therapist says? Are you?
I lost the window. I was like, where are y'all? Okay. Yes, my therapist says, so sometimes I come in there and I am like 4-year-old doing a tantrum, Paula, and she goes, and what next? And what's next? And what now? And that reminder for me is that, like, okay, if you're feeling it right now, you're like in that space, what's next? And that the promise of the what's next is always there. She oftentimes will have me like look back to, remember when you thought this was a terrible thing? Then what? Remember, right? Like the actual facts of it is similar to the work you do, Neha, when it's like thinking about imposter syndrome. What's the actual facts here, right? As opposed to what is going on in your head, what's the facts? And so being able to remember, this is just this moment. And sometimes you can sit in the moment and just say, okay, this moment don't feel good. I'm gonna wait for it to pass. I know something else is better is coming. And that's also a place of joy, right? I can look towards and wait for something. Jeena, talk to me.
Oh my gosh, I was like just noticing like all the activation I was feeling as all of you guys were talking. I think, Cynthia, what you just said, and also Neha, about how we are taught, right, by these systems of oppression that it's a fixed pie. Especially, I think, as women of color, we're often taught that there's only one seat at the table for somebody that looks like you. So we're being pitted against each other. And just how liberating it is to see that for what it is and say, you know what, I am no longer going to own that narrative, and just to like radically drop it, just how freeing that is. Right. And there are so many of these messaging that we all get, and just that process of waking up to these systems of oppression it's a journey, but I mean, what I've gained at the end is joy. And, I think there is definitely that like, what joy, that's so frivolous. And I'm like, listen, I've got all kinds of battle marks and scars on my body that shows that I earned this joy. It is not something that is frivolous. I had to walk through trauma and hardship, and what I got at the end is joy. And for me, that is just like such an act of resistance and persistence. So let's see, I think, like really owning joy as a form of like liberating yourself from all of these systemic oppression that we live with.
So I want to hear from the folks who are in attendance. So using the chat, answer the question that I asked, which is, what are the ways in which you encourage or find joy in your own life and your profession? And I want us to actually double down and and state what the things are, because sometimes we forget the tools, the tips, the resources, the things that actually make us happy. And in the times in which, I mean, we're going into an election here, we need to figure out where that resilience and that joy is and hold on to it, because every single time you turn on the news, or sometimes it's to open up your lap, whatever, there's something that might trigger you. And if we can remember that it is not, anybody who's ever heard me speak knows that I say this all the time, but I want to share it now. My mother used to say, you can either be the wind or the leaf. And it just means that if you are the leaf, you might get there, but if you are the wind, you decide, right? You are that breeze that says, I'm gonna go over here. And sometimes that breeze just literally means that right now, I don't feel it. I'm gonna shut everything down. I don't want to do this right now, right? And sometimes it is, oh no, I'm gonna take back this joy from what I need to in order to manifest whatever I need at this time. And so we can feel helpless. I just don't want us to feel helpless. When we talked about community, that's what we get. I see there are friends who are on here right now. There are former clients, current clients, there are folks who are on here who I see and their names, and I start to smile because I know that they are part of my joy strategy. So I want to know, what are y'all's joy strategy? And while I say that, Cynthia, you just gave me that, you gave me a little tinkle with your eye. Did something just come up for you?
No, I just love that this gathering is like so meta, because it's about talking about joy and community, and it is like continually generating that. And I can see it already planting, like, I'm a kind of visual person, so like I can see it already planting seeds amongst everybody here, and then everybody here can like germinate them for themselves and also spread it to other people. And it just gives me a lot of hope, which is a corny thing, but so needed. And I also love what everyone's sharing in the chat.
I mean, cultivate it. It's kind of like you being a joy evangelist by owning it yourself, right? And by showing that it can happen. And I want to repeat that it is not being like, I have friends who have called me Pollyanna, like Paula and Pollyanna. I like to be happy. It's not right. I do, but there are times when I don't feel happy. There are times when I can say, this sucks. But in those spaces still is where is how can I find the joy here? Is my way of navigating this. Some of you know that I've had some significant trauma, as I think all of us have, but significant one where in my agreement with the universe, I've been like, okay, well, those terrible things happen, so that means nothing else should happen, right? Like, I'm good. Like, I want to be released from anything bad happening. And it's like, oh, you didn't get the memo that I sent you that said that nothing else was supposed to happen bad. But I will share with you this. My son, when he was 1 year old, he had cancer. And I mean, I just knew my daughter, she never ever walked into a hospital other than when we were visiting someone. She was fine. And then I have this child 8 years later, and it's like, wait, cancer, that was not okay. We navigated all that. Thankfully, he is wonderful, fine, and safe. But what he does is remind me about the joy. Sometimes he'll say something and I'm like, oh my gosh. Right? Like and there's some folks on here who know him. He will just say what comes out. Right? Like you should be happy that I was okay with the eggs you made this morning. I'm like, I guess I'm happy with it. But it's just knowing that if 1 out of 3 kids with the cancer that he had survives, he's the one. That brings me joy, even if he's getting on my nerves that day. You see what I'm saying? Like it doesn't have to be all flowers and balloons to feel the joy in it, is what I'm trying to explain to you all. Let's see what we have here. We have knowing yourself and being yourself, getting involved in communities outside my profession. Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Let's find joy in the silos that can we getting out of some of those silos. And that's also where we make ourselves better by challenging, not being in that sameness and that comfort all the time too. Faith, family, community, absolutely.
I'm thinking about that authenticity piece, like what Cynthia, you just wrote about, I can't remember now, I have to scroll up, knowing and being yourself. And Paula, what you were talking about, I'm like, it's sticky for me, right? Like it's sticking with me because I'm thinking about how lonely that can feel and how tricky it can be for some of us to be our authentic self, to speak our truths, to raise our voices, to speak truth to power. And I'm thinking about how this is where community for me, and I am an introvert too. So Cynthia like super was soaking in everything you were saying. And I was signing my own permission slip because you were kind of holding my hand as I signed it. But I was thinking about, I had to speak truth to power this weekend. And I actually was so grateful that there were other people who shared my perspective as a brown woman and spoke up in support of the issue I raised, because it was scary. It was scary to kind of put myself out there and put myself at risk, speaking truth, right? Like being authentic, living in alignment with my values of owning your value, speaking your voice, like rocking the boat, right? And it's scary to be the only boat rocker, I guess is what I'm saying. So what helped, the authenticity piece is so key for me, for me to find joy, but it is so difficult in certain circles and in certain spaces and in this time. And so for me, like finding those allies and knowing that like I'm not alone and having them kind of start to kind of rock that boat with me has been a lifesaver. It has allowed me to be more of who I am.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you said that, Neha, because I fully agree. I mean, make no mistake about it. I do not think that it is even oftentimes safe physically, mentally, psychologically for people of color and women of color to be themselves and be their full authentic self at work. I don't think that is the reality that we live in yet. So I think it's like always a judgment call about time, circumstance, background, who you're talking to, what's at stake, whether we are, going to take that moment to speak truth to power. And it's not for nothing. Like, I don't mean to like make light of it at all. And I always teach this in my workshops too. It's like one piece of it is, figuring out what it is that you stand for and what you want to take a stand on. But then you have to make sure that you tee up your allies and your colleagues and whoever else is like safe to support you from a communal perspective, because I do believe in the power of organizing and the power of numbers. I used to be unionized when I was a lawyer. Like, I love to see, there being a bit of a resurgence in unionization and just organizing in workplaces now. It's definitely another both and, like, yes, like when it's the right time, and we have to be able to know that that's that like self-discernment piece. Like, when it's the right time, take the stand, but make sure that you have the people who have your back behind you. Because I mean, that's probably the lawyer part of me speaking too, is like, make sure you're protected.
Mitigate risk.
Yeah.
It feels audacious. Like, it feels audacious to
Yeah.
claim joy. It feels audacious to be myself in a lot of these circles. And I have to keep doing exactly what we said. Like, I have to remind myself that I am audacious. Like, fuck yeah. I'm going to have the audacity to claim joy. And I deserve that. But it's not a message that many of us are receiving, that we deserve joy. So we have to give that message to each other and to ourselves.
I mean, to me, that's exactly why joy is resistance and it's persistence. I mean, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Jeena, what are you going to say?
Yeah, and I think the more that each of us do this, the more we're freeing and empowering others to do this. Like, one of the scariest things that I did this year was to decide, I decided I'm only working Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Like, right? Like, I don't think I need to like explain. I always feel like when I say that I have to explain myself, but I'm going to resist that urge to have to explain myself, because again, I think that's learned oppression. But just the number of emails that I got back from people when they get my out of office message and they're like, I am so appreciative that you're doing this. I think everyone should do this. Like, and I was just sort of expecting, that reaction, like, oh, you just can't be that good at what you do, or we can't take you seriously because what, you work 3 days a week. And I guess if certain people want to think that's not right. I can't own that, right? That is like their issue, and that has actually nothing to do with me. And I want to like radically invite each and every one of you to rest when you need to.
And that resonates for me, because my summer sabbatical is now incorporated into my must do, need do, will do. And what I realized is that people will flex. Like I have people will reach out and will be like, oh, I know that you're going to be in your summer sabbatical. So can we do this in September or should we do this before? Like, so it is incorporated into the culture that I'm creating for myself, which I had to do out of necessity because last year, if many of you know that I was sick. And I was like, I'm taking the summer off. I need to be able to feel myself. But what I have, and somebody mentioned this earlier, is also like, it's like a wins thing. I call it my joy jar. Literally today, whether it's virtual or an actual jar, today this thing made me feel good. Today, right? So that sometimes when I just cannot tap into that core piece, I go and grab that and be like, oh, remember that day? That's why I love pictures. If you are with me, we're going to take a picture because I like to remember. My father's a photographer. I want to remember all of the experiences that I've had with the people who have brought me joy, because then I can remember the feeling that I had of joy. And, you know, I don't want any of you to leave here without remembering that it is our responsibility as a community to remind people of their magic so that they can feel joy and so that we can feel joy together. We have to do that. There's a question, y'all, and I'd love to hear your response. What strategies can you suggest for handling rejection? And I think about this and aligning with joy is my first response is that sometimes rejection is a blessing and you should take joy in that. But what do y'all have to say? What do you think? What do you think about this?
I like to think of rejection as redirection, similarly to I think what you're saying, Paula, and to remind myself that oftentimes it's a bit of a numbers game and that each no brings me closer to my next yes, because statistically it will be true. So I try, you know, it's so hard. I try not to take things personally, and that's one of my bigger struggles, is to not to over personalize, but I know that I can continue to break that cycle for myself.
Yeah. Anybody else? Response to that?
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you're rejected, like just taking a moment to be like, ouch, like that really, I've been hurt. You know, like just to, wow, that felt wounding, or that was really hurtful, or I feel rejected. Like whatever it is, naming it and acknowledging it. And also that thing, it just wasn't meant for you. Not in this moment, right? It could change in the future. And I think there is almost like this trusting that kind of you can cultivate over time where you go, okay, that wasn't meant for me. And there is, right, there's something else at work here, and having that trust.
I would agree with what everyone said so far about recognizing it and allowing yourself to feel sad and frustrated, and also redirecting. I would also say normalize it, you know, connecting it to my work on building confidence, right? Like we tend to actually feel like it's only us and we allow that to define us. And that's where we allow the kind of system of bias to hold us back. So I think it's important to normalize it. Johannes Haushofer created a CV of failures, and he's like a professor, he at least was a professor at Princeton. And this CV of failures was like all these rejections he got. It's so, I still like hearken back to it because I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Even this professor at Princeton, who's like a white dude, like has all these rejections too. He doesn't have to deal with all the bias crap, but normalizing, I think, is really important.
I think that, first of all, thank you for asking the question, for the person who asked the question. I think everybody can relate to that. And to relate that to our point about joy as we close, remembering one, that we owe each other magic reminders, remembering that the walls of any workplace are porous and that anything that's happening outside will impact the people who are inside, and that we all deserve to be in places where we can be authentic and to feel joy. And if you are someone who can manage that or bring that for somebody else, I encourage you to do so. With that, I knew that this is going to be a short hour with some people who I thought and think are fabulous. And I want to thank all of you for being here in your authentic space, and for loving on each other, loving on me, and loving on the folks who join. And for those of you who will watch this in recording, we love you too. And hope that you can find joy wherever you sit today and as you go forward. Everybody, love yourselves, tell somebody, tell a friend, that they are joyful and they bring you joy, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you all.
Bye, bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
See ya.